Okay. Yeah. Erev Tov, everyone. I discussed with you why it says Vayas B'Tzalel es Orim. Why B'Tzalel's name is mentioned regarding the Orim, whereas all the other artifacts in the Mishkan are, so to speak, anonymous. Vayas, Vayasu, doesn't say who did it. We understand probably that B'Tzalel was in charge of the whole Mishkan. So he made, but Rashi points out, as I discussed with you, that since B'Tzalel was Moser Nefesh regarding the Orim, so therefore it's called on his name. So the Meforshim raise an interesting question, especially the later Meforshim. Why didn't Moshe make the Orim? Where's Moshe in all of this? We'll read in Parshas Pekudei that Vayokam Moshe Samishkan. He put it all together. He erected it. He did it. Nisim, beams were so heavy, no human being could do it, and he did it. But where is he in the Mishkan? Why don't we find, so we have Midrashim, I discussed with you once the Medrash, how the menorah was made. So there it says that Moshe threw it in the fire. But the Torah doesn't, Moshe is invisible in the Mishkan. And so the question regarding the Orim is certainly even more pertinent, according to the opinion of Rashi, of the Ramban, that the Mishkan was built after the Egel. No, I got it backwards. According to the opinion of Rashi, that it was built after the Egel to be a kapora. So where's Moshe in all of this? So there are a few ideas here. Once you start to analyze the Torah in depth, many things rise to the surface, things that you never thought about before. And the later Achronim, especially the Hasidic Rabbeim and the Bali Musar, in their approach to Torah, discovered new gems for us that perhaps we wouldn't think of ourselves. The Gemara tells us, Luchos v'shivrei luchos munachim b'or. Munachos b'or. That in the Aron Kodesh were the second set of luchos that Moshe brought down from Sinai, that were the whole luchos. But the pieces of the first luchos that Moshe shattered also were put into the Aron. Why were they put in the Aron? We have, for instance, in an Aron Kodesh, if a Sefer Torah, after long years of use, can no longer be repaired, and it's not kosher anymore, so we give it a proper burial. Sforim that are no longer usable, so it was shemos, so we bury them. Here, Why should he take the shattered luchos and put them in the ark? The shattered luchos are the symbol of everything that went wrong, not right. So you have on the luchos it said Lo yeh lecho Elohim acherim al ponoi, and now you got the shattered luchos that testify that they did have an Elohim acherim. So Moshe should have disposed of the shivrei luchos. Yet the Torah tells us that they were in the Aron. So there's a famous piece, Reb Tzadok HaKohen Bilublin, the great Reb Tzadok. He says a fantastic idea, radical. I mean, the greatness of great people is that they can afford to be radical. We ordinary people have to toe the line. But there are people that are entitled, so to speak, to be outside of the box. And Tzadok is one of the most seminal thinkers of the last centuries in the Jewish world. He wrote so many svarim, and he's had quite a revival in our time. For a period of time, he was almost unknown. Anyway, the Tzadok says, the Gemara says, Kol hakohes kilu oved avodah zarah. That if a person is overcome by anger, so that is related already to the fact that he worships a strange God. Because if we worship God correctly, there's nothing to be angry about. Moshe Rabbeinu shattered the luchos out of anger. So he, so to speak, is also a participant in the Maaseh Egel, because it's Kilo Oved Avodah Zarah. So you had Moshe and Aaron, the two leaders of the Jewish people. Moshe and Aaron, the Cholanot. They're complicit in the Egel. So the Torah wanted to teach us that we should remember that. We should remember what Kaas does. We should remember what trying to be too nice a guy does. We should remember that great people are also human beings. Great human beings, but still human beings. That's what the Ribbono Shalom told Moshe, you're asking too much. And therefore the Shivrei Luchos were in the Aron. And therefore Moshe Kunta made the Aron. Because he was complicit as well. And that's why it says in the Torah, Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur was the architect. Who was Hur? Hur, according to the Gemara, is the son of Miriam. What happened to Hur? We saw Hur in the war against Amalek. He's there with Moshe. V'idei Moshe kvedim. So Mizeh Echad. So Aaron and Hur held up. Hur disappears. So the Gemara says Hur was killed at the Maaseh Egel because he was not complicit. He stood up He said Savoda Zorah, but he did it at the risk of his life. And he was killed by the Erev Rav. He was killed by the Jewish people. Many times the one who tells the truth is the victim. People don't like to hear it. People like to hear soothing things. We had it in the Haftorah last Shabbos, the great Haftorah of Eliyahu Hanavi. Achav says to him, "V'haftos Ocher Yisrael." You're the Ocher Yisrael. Eliyahu Hanavi is the Ocher Yisrael. How do you even say that? But that's what happens. So the Torah alludes to all of this. Moshe can't make the Aron because Moshe is a piece of it. The Shivrei Luchos is Moshe. And that's why it says by Betzalel Shemosar Nafsho. He was like Hur. He was descended from Hur. It was his Zayda. And Hur was Mosar Nafsho literally. He gave up his life. Betzalel was Mosar Nafsho in his work, in his living, in his talents. And therefore the Aron, it says, Vayas Betzalel Asoron. It doesn't say anything about Moshe or Aaron. It's a remarkable idea. So part of that idea, Tzaddik expands it, not only regarding this, but he expands the idea that the Gemara says that ein memanim parnas al tzibur, you don't appoint a leader, elin kein kupo shel shrotzim al shichma. Scott is not a perfect person. I mean, here in Israel, we're machmir in that halacha. But basically, it's a realistic thing. You don't want, the Chafetz Chaim can't be the prime minister. Doesn't go together. What's the difference between the Melech and the Navi and the Kohen? The Melech's a different job completely. You have to have a different personality. And therefore, Moshe, so to speak, had to have his imperfections. And that's why the Torah tells us about it. The Rambam says that Moshe Rabbeinu's imperfection was kas. Moshe was a kas, and he had anger, temper. But the Torah tells us about it. And here the Torah tells us subtly about it. It doesn't say it openly. By striking the rock, it'll say it openly. By Yitzov Moshe. But here it's a subtle understanding. But that's a great lesson for us. How to appreciate what goes on in the world, how we look at things, what expectations we should have. The Torah is certainly not in favor of corrupt people. But the Torah does not imagine that there are perfect people either. In Tzadik Boretz Asher Yaseh Tov V'lo Yachta. So it's an attitude. So we now understand why it says Betzalel's name by the construction of the Aron, and why Moshe didn't construct it, and why the broken pieces of the Luchos were in the Aron, all to give us this picture of the reality of life, not of an imaginary world of perfection. That world has not yet arrived. We have to deal with the world the way it is. And even in that world, there can be that the Shekhinah will dwell amongst us. That's a great lesson here. It's a great lesson of the Mishkan. And this is a very important idea, I feel, that we should be able to relate to and give us strength and purpose and direction. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash, Omer Rotsa Gori Baruch Hu L'Zakus Yisrael, L'Ficha Chir B'Lahem Torah and Mitzvot Shenamar, I don't know if I'll make some answers going.